I'm not sure about you, but there's something of this narrative between Jesus and Peter that makes me think that there's something incredible about Jesus that we might keep missing. Was he actually Australian? I mean, come on. Who has a barbecue on the beach in sunny weather? Australians, all the time. I'm joking, but thumbs up to the Australians. All jokes aside, Jesus prepares on the beach a meal. He prepares a spontaneous, unplanned, well, to the disciples seemingly unplanned, moment of table fellowship. A platform around which Jesus begins to minister and to release restoration through fellowship. Jesus knows why the disciples are where they are. He knows why they're in the boat. He knows that there's fear and anxiety. There's tension about what they need to do, what they should do, what they must do. Just what exactly? A few days ago, their leader was killed, and in the days of Jesus, if your leader was killed, it meant you were public enemy number one. The Romans, all of a sudden, you're a threat to them as well. The Jewish community that had killed Jesus, you're still a threat to them. So what do they do? Where do they go? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? We've got to get out of this place. Quick, go fish. So Jesus turns up unannounced and starts to prepare a table before the disciples in the presence of their enemies, because he knows what they need. He knows that they need to be restored in so many ways. To Peter, Jesus turns in John 21 and verse 15 and begins to unpick the pieces of Good Friday. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Interestingly, Jesus uses the word agape for the first two. And the word agape means unconditional love. He says to Peter, do you love me unconditionally? Is there any reason for why you might love me? And Peter replies with the third word that Jesus uses. Peter replies with philo, which is like a brotherly, familial kind of love. And now that's a good thing. It's a wonderful thing to say. But Peter doesn't quite get what Jesus is really asking. But here's the amazing part of what Jesus does next. Jesus changes his word to say to Peter for the third time, do you philo? Do you love me? Let me meet you where you are to help your understanding and say, do you love me in the ways that you've said? And Peter says, of course I love you, Lord. And the narrative goes on. If Peter isn't ready for the next step of agape, unconditional love, then Jesus meets him where he's at in order to restore him where it had gone wrong. Through a fellowship meal, Peter, who did not enter into the fellowship of Jesus on Good Friday for whatever reason, finds Jesus extending a hand of welcome, an invitation to a makeshift meal that they can all share as disciples together. It's just remarkable. It's out of place. It's out of context. It's out of normality. Jesus restores through fellowship. He concludes with the instruction, follow me. But Jesus also goes further. Peter, for some reason, all of a sudden becomes preoccupied with John and says, what about him, Lord? And Jesus cuts out the toxic comparative element and says, so what? What about him? To paraphrase, it's like Jesus said, you follow me and take care of your heart and mind. Don't get bogged down in what other people are thinking or what other people are doing. Comparison will kill our fellowship because it will distract us from the calling that God has given to each of us. You follow me, Jesus says to Peter. And the same is true for each of us. How easy is it at times to get distracted or become comparative in some way, either for ourselves or in our world around us, and to take our eyes off Jesus and think more about the comparison than about the reality of what Jesus might be calling us to do. Jesus is spiritually truthful to the end. He doesn't let the moment shape his truth. His truth shapes the moment. The truth that comparison kills fellowship and stifles Christian unity is pressing in this narrative. We're in a place out of context. We're in a time that's out of normality, and at times possibly tempted to compare with others in some way, shape, or form. But Jesus says, my fellowship is your goal. A fellowship that releases and restores in the lives of all who come to Jesus. Rich, diverse, deep, and meaningful. Fellowship beckons us to move closer to Jesus and to be in fellowship with him. To be known is to be loved, and to be loved is to be known, whatever our context. Courtesy of COVID-19. The fellowship of Jesus still proves that we are loved and that we can be restored from what has gone before.